Yeah, the Shelleys had this lovely Amantha named Yankee Girl, and we were in the Cape, and for some reason your family went back to Essex, and they called and asked us if we'd like to bring the boat from the vineyard back to Essex. So we had our 4 children, Abby, or 3?
I can't remember if we had 3 or 4.
But we had Jean Robertson.
Probably 3.
Jean Solid with us. Who else was with us? And we headed off Peace of Fog and spent a night in Cuttyhunk. And we were headed out across Buzzards Bay, absolute Peace of Fog. And we heard this moo of a pretty good sized boat. And I said, I know that horn from the Connecticut River. It has to be a Poling number 7 or something. And these were small oil tankers that brought diesel fuel up to Boston from New Jersey. And we heard it, and we were sailing along in a nice breeze, but we couldn't see a thing. And all of a sudden I realized, and this was before radar, all of a sudden I said, we are not on a good course. And no matter how we steered, I was sure we were going to be in collision. And we got life jackets on everybody. And no matter how I did a 180, and all of a sudden it seemed to do made whatever adjustment, but it just was keeping going. And I think it was one of the scariest moments of my life because we could not get out. And I had 2 thoughts. I don't want to kill my wife and my children, but I was most scared of your dad if we destroyed the Amantha.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, there was this huge blast of horn. And I just put the boat in the irons. There was enough wind to sail. And all of a sudden, the steel side went right by the boat. And after that, when I changed my underwear, we sailed on, and we were on course. We went right into Pay Down, and ultimately back. But it was and I did tell your dad about it, and he decided that we must have some luck on our side because they loaned us Yankee Girls for several trips, and the ultimate trip was, I think we made 2 trips from Fort Clyde all the way back to Essex. We would drive and meet him, then your family could stay up in Froomsmore, and we'd bring the boat back to Essex. And we became obviously very good friends of Pete and Betty Shelley. And this one of the 3 boys, we became extraordinarily fond of. And I'm not sure totally why. I think you were the one who was very nice to Kent. When Kent started to spend his summers living at their house, I had been Commodore of the Pettipark Yacht Club, which is the summer camp to learn sailing, sort of, and the racing, and then also the source of frostbiting in the winter. And I never could get your parents interested in that, but Kent, I don't know how old he was when he started, and since I ran the program, I think the ages were 10, but I think I pulled his rank and got him involved as a 9-year-old in Pettipark, and he did that for, I didn't realize it, Abby Kent said he did it for 6 years.
Hmm.
And
time flies.
He spent 3 years. He spent 3 years with Tin Cup living at your house. tin cup with that aluminum outboard. So we could get you from South Grove up to Pettit Park and back.
Mhm.
Then he spent a year, I think, or two with the Ingersolls, he and Charlie B. and Ben. Then he spent a year with, was it the Moose? Who was the other one they spent time with? But anyway, Kent loved Essex, and that's where he really blossomed as a sailor. And the only other thing I remember related to Sean's is that not Jane Ingersoll, who is Tom married to?
Jane?
Jane
Scheider.
Schneider was a very good sailor.
Oh, yeah.
And
Very competitive.
I hired her one of those years to be the head instructor at Pettit Park.
Oh, did you? I didn't know that.
And that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then through the Shells we got to know the Ingersolls, and through Kent and Charlie. And Essex became some of the best years of our lives. And when I couldn't find work around Essex, at one point your dad sort of talked to me about coming to work for Sheldon's Truth. I said, that is ridiculous. I really believed in the Peter principle, and which is man rises to his level of incompetence.
Yeah.
And I would have been totally incompetent. But he thought I could do traveling stuff for him.
Yeah.
And we ended up back in Chicago. But we always maintained this relationship with Essex, but particularly with the Shawns.
Well, you had a nice crowd. It was just kind of a unique time, I think, because there was the Ingersolls and Charlie Ty and Nancy Ty and they're just the Magruders. There were just a bunch of fun people that were all sort of
Busy.
Yeah, Beasy, and the Angers and
The
stuff.
Moses.
Yeah, and they all were just kind of like-minded and I don't know, able to have fun together and enjoy each other's company. And even after you had moved, I remember you'd come down for parties or events of one kind or another and sort of pick up right where you left off.
Yeah. Every November they had a scorpion dance. And
Scorpion dance?
yeah,
You
scorpion.
danced with scorpions.
Yeah.
And
Tell them about the scorpion dance.
well, the scorpions were just a bunch of people who had birthdays in November. And it was always wild, a bit too much to drink. And Stu Ingersoll had this boat, the Flora, which was an old Chesapeake Bay oyster boat with an amazing diesel engine.
Yeah.
And at 3 or 4 in the morning, still dark, we'd all head to the boat work and on Flora for a trip up the river at sunrise. And we were all hungover, it was still a bit young, and we survived. I never understood why we all survived.
I know.
It was amazing. And you look at the individual, what happened to all those people in the rest of their lifetimes. Many of them, including me, we all had the house for Nancy Ty. But we, and your dad, and she was just lovely and fun.
Yeah.
And still is today, although we haven't seen her now in 2 years. The Maroons, boy, talk about a yo-yo couple. And we just finally got in touch with Millie is back living in us.
Oh.
And she has one floor of the house in Scott and his wife
Mm-hmm.
who bought the Essex Veterinary Hospital.
Oh,
And
okay.
she owns and runs that.
Hmm.
And Scott has been dry for now 19 years.
Wow.
And yeah, he owns he invested in a lot of real estate.
Hmm.
But anyway, all of these people, a lot were divorced over the years and went on to other lives. But we kept in touch for a long
Yeah.
time with the lives.
So some of these people were sort of, in a way, you're the same way. I think that sort of bigger than life kind of people that I don't know. Maybe they were around today, but I don't know them. But Stu, you know, Stu Ingersoll ran the Essex Boat Works, and he was this sort of commanding presence. He played the banjo and the tuba, and he started these jazz festivals where they would invite a bunch of jazz bands from around, and they'd all play it in the Essex Boat Works there in the great big shed, and they'd set up a stage and stuff. But and Stewart was the one who had gotten Flora, this oyster boat from the Chesapeake, and this boat had an old piano on the deck that was just always out in the weather, and you know, if they could get somebody who could play it, they'd just start banging on the piano, and people would bring out instruments while this sort of like an old tugboat would be going up the river or something like that with its 3-cylinder engine chugging away there. And then just across the street from you, or no, just down the street from you was Giff Warner, who was another
Ultimate character.
yeah, just sort of bigger than life character. I mean, just these
In what way?
Well, Yippee married a woman, Enid, who was tall, elegant, immaculate. Everything was clean, fresh. She just was the ultimate lady. Anyway, I was at the point where we were talking about these cowboys. And these last things were all around the inside of his garage. And I said, what the hell are those? He said, "Whoop. Don't try to lift them. They're very, very heavy. And they're glass. I just remember them being a dark color. And let's back up. During World War II, the Americans, we sunk a German U-boat off of Block Island. And our government at the end of the war made an agreement with Germany to leave it there. It had about 70 or 80 crewmen who were dead on it, and they did not want it disturbed. This is going to be their grave for eternity. Well, Yippee heard that at the end of World War II, but during World War II, the Germans used mercury as ballast in those submarines. And ballast and mercury is very compact, very heavy, and worth a lot of money. And here was all this stuff in Yippie's garage. And you could not lift these little cowboys, they weren't that big, and I would do them, try to lift them. And then the story came out that somebody may have been, they went down with divers to seal the boat, and they discovered somebody had been on it. And then they discovered that all the mercury ballast was missing. By that time, It was all gone from his mind, and he gone wherever he sold it. He made a full-page picture in Life magazine. I still don't remember the details of this, other than the fact that there was a World War II tanker, they called them a T-2 tanker, that broke in half off Hatteras and somewhere out off of the North Carolina or Virginia coast. And it was full of fuel. And the way the damn thing had broken in half, the two sections were, the front half, where the ballast was, were down, and they were just floating around out in this maelstrom of weather. But these tugboats thought about the millions of gallons of fuel and making money. And they headed out. When they got there was a guy with a shotgun sitting on the deck of one boat and said, "You try to put a line in this boat, you're dead." And so they left. Finally, a boat that he knew was coming came out, and they towed these half sections into Newport.
Huh.
And the picture that was a full page in Life magazine was this guy sitting in a chair like that, up on the back legs, with a shotgun across his lap, against a tilted front and back half of the tanker. And Giffey made a fortune. Which he split with the two tows that he made a deal with to tow him in.
Wow.
But then the ultimate thing he did, Giffey heard that the price of lobster was just incredible in France. That where lobsters were 50 cents a pound then, they were $2 a pound in France. So he bought a used poling. And these are oil tankers.
Yeah.
And he built inside, he and I forgot his son's name. Abby, do you remember?
Oh, yes.
Begin with S. Anyway.
Right. I remember his son.
And a couple of
His
guys.
daughter was Holly.
Holly, right.
Yeah.
And anyway, they built shelves in these, in the holes. They had them. He did this, I think, in New London, but maybe elsewhere. I think it was in New London. And nobody knew what was going on at the old Thames shipyard. And they cleaned this thing, sandblasted inside, got rid of all the oil stuff. And then they started buying lobster, or made deals with the lobster people in New Bedford and Fairhaven. And they filled this thing full of, I don't know how many thousands of lobsters. And they started across the Atlantic.
In a coastal tanker.
In a coastal tanker. Well, that was fine. However, the boat started to leak. No. Yeah, something started. No. The circulating pumps bringing fresh salt water from outside the boat into the tank
Oh.
to keep the lobsters alive.
Yeah.
Failed.
Oh, God.
First one,
Oh.
then two, then three. And so the boat arrived at Le Havre, France, let's say with 4,000 or 5,000 now dead lobsters on it. And they would not, the French government would not allow the boat to land. And Gibbey was told you have to anchor offshore. So they anchored offshore and tried to negotiate with how do they get the boat in on the to take 5,000-10,000 dead lobsters off it. And I never heard of what ultimately happened to the lobsters of the boat, other than the fact that the crew of the boat miraculously disappeared while the boat was anchored off the harbor. And Hippie was home like nothing had happened. and
Wow.
and the crew, he just abandoned the boat, abandoned the lot while cleaning up the mess. The French government ended up with this god-awful mess to deal with.
Good grief.
So,
Open the seacocks.
so yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But he was, another time, he was hired, he bought an old Navy dredge from World War II. And he was hiring out harbors along the Connecticut shore. And the one that I know the real story about was Madison, Connecticut, which is sort of an island, a U. And you'd sail, there was a harbor there full of little boats, Blue Jays. It was a small boat harbor, no yachts. But it was, the sand was building up, and Hippie won a contract to dredge the entrance of the harbor so the boats could get in over the sandbars that were building up. And Hippie did what he felt he was committed to do, and they paid half the money, he wanted the other half. And they said, well, we don't think you did it quite the way we wanted it or the way we contracted it. We're not going to pay it. You have to go to court to get it. But Hippie thought of a better answer. He took his 200-foot dredge, it was a big ship, dredge, and he rammed it up on the beach across the entrance to the harbor. And then sat on it. And they sent the police, they sent the Coast Guard, they sent everything. I'm sorry, the engines don't work anymore. I can't get it off.
Yeah.
And they went to court, they tried to do it. I may own this boat, but I'm bankrupt.
Yeah.
I can't deal with it. So all I know is all of a sudden one day there's some very, very wealthy people in Madison, Connecticut. And all of a sudden the boat miraculously disappeared from the across the harbor and showed up in Saybrook. And a guy named, who did all the, ended up owning it. Who was the guy that used to run up around us and put in the moorings and...
Oh, yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah, I'll think of it in a second. I know just who you mean. Yeah. Not Bundy.
No. Something similar. A wonderful name.
Yeah.
And it turned out Hippie gave him the boat.
Yeah.
And it sat for 3 or 4 or 5 years. He was going to use it to do dredging on the
Yeah, and he had a tug.
Yes.
Yeah.
He had a tug so he could move this thing.
I'll think of it in a second.
But anyhow, Anyway.
Yeah.
So, and that boat sat there for about 10, 15 years, rusting, and finally, I don't know who, somebody for the scrap iron came down. I remember it being cut down deck by deck and piece by piece and sold to scrap. But Hippie Warner, and Hippie always did it just like it was the most casual, normal thing that everybody did.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they're picking on me. You do it or you do it.
Yeah.
And you might do it. I've watched your career.
Now, and you knew the Dones.
Oh yeah.
Too, and I think did they come on Zapard?
No, they were pretty in bad shape by then.
Oh, okay.
We sailed with them
on Bonnie Lass.
And Bonnie Lass, and also we visited when they had the island, the house in the
Yes,
island
yeah.
in the Bahamas. And we sailed over and Pete Wells's, but we had Pete Wells's
Yeah.
from number 40. And it was just Abby and I and the kids.
Yeah.
And but that's another story.
Yeah.
Was up there.
Well, I remember a long time ago. I think that maybe you were in the the farm, what was the big white farmhouse on the river? It wasn't Wagner's. When you first moved to Lyme.
It was
Oh.
Wagner's.
Wagner's?
Wagner,
Yeah, okay. But you and my parents, and maybe not the Dones, rented a house on Lake Sunapee in the winter, and we skied at King Ridge.
Actually, it was on Elephant's Lake where Becky and
Oh,
okay. And Mike, who are here now, they have bought a house on Elephant's. And you're right.
and I remember this little cottage on the lake that probably wasn't really ready for winter, and
It
we were
was
all
cold.
it was cold, and we were all huddled in there. It was kind of fun, but
And those were, he was a pharmacist. She had been a nurse. And they had a house in Plymouth, Vermont.
yeah,
And we go up and stay in this house with a big red barn. And we had chemo when it first opened. And
And it was small.
yeah,
what?
it was
It
small,
was not very big.
Well, anyway,
just down the road from Calvin Coolidge's birthplace. Yeah,
And Bob had this thing that everybody should start the day with oatmeal. And he'd make this huge pot of oatmeal every morning. And every night they'd throw it away.
It was dreadful.
It
Yeah.
was awful. And he would really get mad that nobody would eat his oatmeal. But and that had outhouses in
Yes.
the barn. There were stalls,
yeah,
not stalls. There was an outhouse, and there were two-seaters. They're just a board with a hole,
yeah.
and you put down in. And in the middle of winter, with it 0 degrees outside and snow, with our 4 children getting them up, and the Dones 5 children, 6
Yeah.
children.
6, I think.
We prayed out, and I remember we had holding Tracy to keep her from falling through the hole. And the whole wind would come underneath, up underneath. And I can't breathe. And then it'll be an icicle. And she was so in tears. Finally she peed and I could put her back to bed. But one year, Darlene, the nuns decided they wanted to stay just the two of them and she another day or two with hemo. So we agreed to take their kids home. We had big station wagon. So their 5 or 6 kids and our 4 kids, Abby and I got in, and we're driving through Northampton, and there was a Friendlies
Mm-hmm.
with all of these stools down this long counter. And we went into Friendlies and we filled every counter. And Timmy was the oldest down to their youngest.
Yeah.
And then ours off the bottom, and they were younger than theirs. So we filled this whole line. And Abby was pregnant with Kent. So she was out like this. And this woman came up to Abby and said, "Oh my dear, it's so nice to see a nice Catholic family."
And the Down kids thought it was hysterical.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Oh God is right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when Kent was living with Mom and Dad, they were at South Cove. They had moved to South Cove, and I think we had the Whaler, and I think Kent went up to Pettipog in the Whaler every day.
In one of the later years.
Yeah, in the later years or something, but must have been kind of fun.
Oh, yeah. Well, Kent ended up working in the Pettipog, but he ended up sailing. And he reminded me in the last 2 years he was there, we had bought a Blue Jay, and he went to all of the harbors. They had exchanges, and he won the junior youth championship of all of the whole thing. ECYRA.
Wow. Yes, ECYRA. Yeah.
He won that award for racing. I had forgotten.
Wow.
But his love of boats and sailing came, and if you talk to him about it, it came from being with your family. It came from being with you in your family. I mean, they had that way.
Yeah. Yeah.